There we go. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another one of our College of Worcester Alumni Insight series and conversations. I'm Thomas MacArthur, Assistant Vice President of Alumni and Family Engagement here at Worcester, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Leah Bowers, class of 2014, and founder of Tuteezy. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that company is, and then we're going to have a really great conversation with Leah throughout the course of this Alumni Insight. So Leah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. All right, so let's get into a little bit of background so that our viewers have an understanding of where you're coming from and your area of expertise. So you created this tutoring and educational consulting company for the creative high school students who convince themselves that science is not for them. Fascinating niche in the market that I can't wait to learn a little bit more about. So for the students who are in love with art and can't see themselves in STEM institutions or in really the science-based careers. So your company, Tuteezy, comes from your own struggles in academics, and it really has been laid out to help students who are struggling in these areas. So Tuteezy offers a refreshing take on the systemic educational approaches to STEM teaching. You build interactive and customized experiences that help break down key scientific concepts for students of all learning styles. You teach via Zoom and tablets, which I could imagine after the pandemic comes in really handy and people are very comfortable with. You work through homework assignments and projects in real time, which I bet is incredibly fortunate for those students. And through one-on-one mentorship and real-life practice problems, you raise students' grades, their confidence, and their interest in the STEM areas. So thrilled to learn a little bit more today about your experience and then how this came to be. So I guess my first question for you is walk us through how you came up with this idea and then brought it to an actual company.
Right. So thank you so much for that introduction, Tom. I have made my way from elementary education all the way up to the academic institution that is graduate school and have received my PhD. But the road through that process was not the kindest towards me as a visual and auditory learner. Most of the time I was in classes where there was a lot of writing on blackboards or on just writing in general that wasn't kind of broken down in a way that I best understood. So there were no drawings incorporated. There weren't any examples or relation to things going on in real life. And it wasn't until I had a teacher who I felt comfortable approaching and who was able to help me reciprocally that I was finally able to get a good handle on how I learned best. And this teacher was able to walk me through practice problems, and we would together do things like highlighting in a word problem what the given information was, writing down those given pieces of information and tying them to variables that needed to be used. From there, figuring out what equations needed to be incorporated to find the solution, and all in the meantime making really nice drawings to go along with the problem to describe what actually was happening. So the time taken to help me in this way is not something that can be afforded in a traditional classroom, at least in the way that it's set up in the United States. There isn't a lot of funding going towards classes, so you have huge class sizes. It's harder for teachers to address the learning styles of every individual student. So I was fortunate enough to have a teacher who took the time to do that for me. I did not go to private school, but my public school was well funded, and we did not have a ton of kids in each class. We had the resources available and so forth. So I was fortunate in that respect. And from there, learned how I learn best and was able to advocate for myself going forward and realize that there isn't just one way to learn, right? I think that a lot of the time we look around, and especially at a younger age, start comparing ourselves to our classmates, start seeing how subjects are presented to us. And if they're not presented in the way that we wish they were, we try to mold ourselves into the way that they're being taught. And that's just such a hindrance on creative learning styles of students who would prefer to learn in other ways. And so a lot of the time, I especially just shut down if I wasn't getting it. But then as soon as I went on a path of being able to learn more creatively, I knew that I could do it and that these subjects were very interesting to me. And I kept on trying to find ways that chemistry in particular at Worcester, was related to the arts. And I was able to do that at Worcester because it's a liberal arts program. I was looking at all sorts of connections between science and the arts, and eventually was an intern at the Smithsonian at the African American History and Culture Museum. But it wasn't without so much support from my teacher in high school, my chemistry teacher, my AP teacher, and then my professor, Dr. Sarah Sobek, who was my thesis advisor, who showed me the way of how art is interconnected with science totally and completely. So I had that internship. And then from there on, I said, okay, wow, I don't have to just be a scientist. I can incorporate science into so many different fields. And that's kind of what propelled me into graduate school. And I just kept with that, trying to having such a huge confidence in that understanding that I was able to find my niches everywhere that I went. And so that's where I am headed with this company, trying to get students to understand that the way in which they learn can be actually an asset and not a detriment to their success in school and their enjoyment in the subjects of chemistry, physics, and math. So born from the frustration of the current academic climate, structure, institution, Tuteezy has been born. So.
And what a really interesting story, right? As you've kind of found your path to passion.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that in many schools, students get put in tracks, right? Because if you don't do well on a test, there might not be the resources to dive in, as you said, and really figure out why that student did poorly on that test.
Right.
And with your kind of this new initiative that you've created, the number of students who will be able to actually perform and, as you said, find their passion and interest in these types of hard sciences is really fascinating. We're going to get to some maybe tips that you might be able to share with parents or high schoolers who may be struggling in some of these areas. But I want to kind of dive a little bit more into kind of what is your mission and vision for the company that you've created? I know you've started this, you're in the process of growing it. Tell us just a little bit more about where you are.
Right. So I have several wonderful students so far that I'm helping to just boost their confidence in STEM subjects, particularly in chemistry, physics, and math. And so my main mission for this company is if I can get just just a few students interested enough in chemistry, students who are creative and can bring their insight and perspective and new understandings of science to the academic institution and higher education. We currently lack that right now. I saw it firsthand as a graduate student and also as a postdoc at Princeton University that we're wholly lacking kind of a innovative, creative presence that marries the hard sciences with art and communication and what whatever else, whatever other fields that you can imagine going together. So if I can get students having a deep confidence in their ability to learn STEM subjects on the track to higher education and being the next innovators of, things that we haven't even thought about in terms of climate change, in terms of renewable energy, in terms of just ways to bring forth new technologies, then I will have considered this company a huge success. I just want kids to know that there is a spot for them in academic institutions. And so this is only a part of making academia more accepting of a totality of types of students.
Mhm. And really, the heart of that is it's inclusion, right? It's making sure that students see themselves in academic institutions like the College of Worcester and others that have very rigorous curriculum, but opening up those opportunities and the doors so that those students see themselves in those areas. I want to ask you a question about mentoring, because we mentioned that at the outset. The College of Worcester obviously is well known for creating a culture of mentoring relationships. Talk to us a little bit about how important that was to your Worcester experience, and then how do you try to instill that in the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, mentorship has been everything to me. Being a mentee to becoming a mentor, and every stage in between. There are different types of mentors, and ones who have been hands-on to pretty hands-off, but like have brought forth ideas that I couldn't even think about on my own, right? So lovingly referred to as JCAP, Dr. Judith Ambergy Peters, really instilled the sense that I could teach, right? She pulled me aside and had me teaching these group breakout sessions as a new experimental learning initiative in the chemistry department. So her seeing me and wanting me to start being a teacher in this environment was a tremendous mentor relationship. Same thing with Dr. Sarah Sobek. I did not know that physical chemistry was something that would really spark my interest until I took her class, and later just grew to love it even more, seeing how it related to art, as I said. And I had some amazing mentors in labs as I was a summer research intern at the College of Worcester. So yeah, Dr. Sarah Blosser was my first mentor, who was more my peer, right? And so she was a few years ahead of me and was able to mentor me in the lab. And I think mentorship is a great way to see the full spectrum of possibilities that you have in store, whether it be a career-based possibility or a type of chemistry that you want to go into, or just ways that you could be living your life. There are just a large variety of mentors that have been in my life. And as someone who is half Black, non-binary, femme, being a mentor to others is really important for me to let kids who look like me know that it's possible to be here, right? That it's possible to go from having such struggles in chemistry and math to having a Ph.D. in physical chemistry and going into the world of renewable energy research, and then deciding that you want to make your own company and try out consulting for a little bit. It's just opening up in that way to whoever comes to me is what I'm giving back from what my mentors have been able to do for me as well. So just that reciprocal relationship is always something that I strive for, no matter what.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, what just a phenomenal, example you are for not only for the young students that you're working with, but also for College of Worcester students who may be watching this, as well as, the parents of those students. I could imagine that starting this company came with some challenges, right? I'm sure it was not easy, an easy road. So I've got kind of two questions. One is, have you always found yourself to be kind of entrepreneurial in your approach to life? And the second part of that is, what were some of those challenges and how did you overcome them in order to get to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've had so many different ideas for what possible companies could, spin out from work that I put behind it. Some of them have just been thoughts, others I have given a go at them, but just I wasn't ready to, and this is kind of going into what the most challenging part of it is that breaking away from the the kind of the 9 to 5 working in a corporate job or an academic job, what have you, breaking away from that has been one of the biggest sort of struggles for creating a new business or jumping into or saying, I'm going to go for it. I think that this is a good idea. I'm nervous, but I'm going to go for it anyway and see how it goes. I was really fortunate enough to have a dad who has his own company. He's an ophthalmologist or an eye surgeon. So I learned a lot from him. He taught me a lot about how he runs his business and has given me really good advice along the way. So that's been amazing. And I would say I also had a lot of help in starting this company too. Thanks to my full discretion, my aunt and my cousin were my cousin was my first student, right? So I said, yeah, like I can tutor you in chemistry and math. You said that you were struggling. Let me see if I can help you. So I just got through him extra validation that I could teach privately. I had taught another student in the past, but I had not considered creating a company until I started tutoring my cousin regularly and seeing that, knowing that his confidence was increasing. He told me so, and his grades were also increasing, and he just was having a much more enjoyable time in those classrooms after I had been teaching him for 3 or 4 months. And then I sort of just on a whim started a Squarespace account for Tuteezy, and kind of just through trial and error, which graduate school gives you a lot of skills. And one of them is you learn to overcome your fear of failure, because in graduate school that happens all the time. So I really credit my experience throughout graduate school and like understanding perseverance, failure as good ways to keep with and grow a company from whatever starting point. So yeah, that's how it's been going so far. And just being at a crossroads where you're being pulled in this kind of, should I just, go for it fully and expand and look for more tutors, or should I be applying to corporate jobs? It's that's been the most difficult kind of thing that I've been like thinking about these days.
Yeah, I can imagine that, we're taught pretty much all throughout high school and college, this idea that, the stability,
Yeah.
you need benefits and a stable paycheck every single month, and and then to break away from that and really kind of retrain yourself to say, no, there's a market for this idea, there's a
Right.
need that I can solve, and to be very kind of entrepreneurial and almost risky in your approach to not just your work, but it's really life, right? Because when you're starting
Right.
your own business, it really does impact all aspects of how
Yeah.
you live.
And it takes like a huge amount of privilege as well. Like I have a safety net, for example. So that risk is um, less so on my mind than it might be for another person,
Yeah.
So like um, I'm willing to take some risk. But yeah, the whole also mentality of this is kind of what you do. You apply for jobs and you get it and you update your LinkedIn and everyone is congratulatory of you and all this. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's good, really good advice. So talk to us a little bit about what is your approach as you're working with students? I assume it's probably middle and high schoolers that you're helping to
right.
coach and tutor. Talk to us about how you do that work.
Yeah, so with every new student, I really like to figure out who they are and what they are struggling with and why they signed up for tutoring to begin with. Um, we work on some things that they bring to my attention as they're based on what they are struggling with. And so I kind of have um, us go through a set of practice problems, an assessment of sorts of just like a lot of different things within that subject area. And I can pick up on what they could use some guidance with. And so I ask them also how their classroom is and how they feel in the class, right? So do you like your teachers? Do you like how the material is being taught? What kind of learner do you think you are? Do you like when people draw out things for you? Do you like when you actually do a bunch of practice problems? Does that help you learn? Do you have to walk around the room and say certain concepts aloud so that you can remember them better? And they're able to kind of tell me how they learn best through this series of questioning. And so I say, okay, sure. And it isn't the first, the first meeting isn't the only time that I'm kind of understanding or assessing or taking in this information. It's throughout our times of meeting that I am gathering information based on, okay, so at the beginning of each session, I ask a student, what are you learning in class? And then we go over mini lessons that I walk through with them. I have my tablet, which I screen share with them on Zoom. And so they ask all of the questions maybe they wouldn't have in class, right? Because you have that serious comparison thing. You have, oh man, like, is this a dumb question? Should I have not asked that? Yeah, so they have this chance to ask all those questions, and then we go through practice problems to just make sure that that concept is really really cemented in their heads. And from there, I jot down all of my observations, and then I share the notes that we've taken over the session, and I share it with the student, and I also share it with the parent, because I think parents are hugely important um, in being able to support them. They support their child, and it creates this really nice foundation for support of the child's learning, even when they're not in a tutoring session. So I share those notes, and then I update the parent on the student's progress, and also observations that I make about how the student learns, and some tips and tricks to use outside of our session and outside of the classroom.
That's fantastic. I love that you've got this really holistic approach to understanding who the student is and how they learn. And I appreciate that you shared a little bit about the different types of learners that are out there,
Right.
so I really appreciate the holistic approach that you take in getting to know the students. I'd like to kind of transition the conversation to tips that you might have for parents who might see their child struggling. How do they step in? What advice do you have for them in order to help their student be the most successful that they can be?
Right. That's a good question. So I start by saying to a lot of parents that it's a really good thing to just start by boosting your kids' confidence in these areas. And that can be working through problems that you know they're good at, right? So reminding them how capable they are. I think that that's great. Also interfacing with anyone who is around your child, knowing what, like seeing how they learn, right? So they're teachers, you might already have a tutor. So seeing and asking those questions, hey, like, have you noticed things that my child appreciates in learning and doesn't appreciate so much? If you could give me any insight for how they learn best, that would be really, really great. And then, of course, there are some there are a lot of free resources that you can use online, such as, Khan Academy videos. The Organic Chemistry Tutor has a YouTube series that is phenomenal. And going online and sitting with your child and watching this video together, asking them if they have any questions, could also be helpful. Asking your child too, just what kind of things in class are difficult for them, right? What types of things in class are things that they like and enjoy. And so you can get a good idea of the type of learner that they are in that respect as well, and kind of just be able to, anytime that you might be sitting down and working through their homework or projects, just knowing what they like and dislike about learning in the classroom can be extremely helpful in guiding them through certain homework assignments and things that they're given from their teachers.
Yeah. And it's really, playing to their strengths, right? Trying to figure
Right.
out what, where they do well, and then kind
Yeah.
of aligning that back to their learning style, right? And you talked a bit about learning styles and whether you're an auditory, visual, if you like more written. So I appreciate you kind of sharing that as parents are watching this, thinking about, how they begin to pinpoint where some of the challenges might be for their student. And
Right.
then obviously celebrating those wins and successes as they have them, to continue to keep their student probably open to new challenges, right? Because as you said earlier, at times you start to shut down,
Yeah.
and that is probably where that student loses so much ground. Whereas if you can continue their interest and their confidence, I bet it makes a world of difference.
Right. And that boosting their confidence is what I've seen gets kids out of the rut. So starting them with a very simple problem, right? Or a few problems really helps them see, oh, I am good at this, what's next? And so getting them out of the rut is the first step. Yeah. And then you're well on your way after that.
Yeah. And I can imagine that many young people that you're working with, so they're probably more receptive to your advice and ideas than maybe their parents. And so it's always nice to have an outside of the maybe family person, maybe cut down on the arguments or tension at the dinner table when they've got someone like you who can, be the outside person to give that support and, help work through some of those problems.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've heard parents say that too. It's like, oh, I try that too, but it's different coming from me, you know?
It's the same thing sometimes with college students, right? We
Mhm.
have, faculty and professional staff will say the same things over and over. But as soon as
Yeah.
an alum comes in and says, hey, this is some really great advice, the students are like, oh, wow, I wish I had known that earlier. So
Yeah.
certainly that outside perspective is always important when thinking about struggles and overcoming them. The last question I really, we've talked about learning styles and tips for parents to identify, and even some ideas for teachers. Lastly, for the students who may be watching this and
Mhm.
struggling, what
Mhm.
advice do you have for them?
Ooh. Yeah, students, I totally feel your struggle. I've been there. Um, some of the key things that I want you to think about and sort of take in are that you know, you might have a big exam coming up, you might have lots of homework to do, all of this stuff. One, it's really important to keep mental health as number one. Just like keep checking in on yourself and making sure that you're okay, because um, having that, kind of secured is going to be the foundation for your success overall. Is kind of how I've learned, especially throughout grad school. Two is that it's really important that you don't compare yourself to other students. What's really the most important thing is that you're doing that the best that you can, and that you're kind of moving along, you're progressing, right, for yourself. So just keep it very internal, and try not to compare yourself to other students in your classroom. Um, and uh, third is that along the comparison route, you're at a liberal arts college, right? The College of Worcester is, in my opinion, in my biased opinion, one of the greatest liberal arts colleges in the world. And um, it's really important that if you feel a desire to love science and love something that's more artistic, to really embrace that, right? We live in a world of nuance, and there is no either or. There can be all of this combined into something amazing. And so if you love all of those things, then that is what we need, right? We need an intense amount of innovation that goes beyond our wildest dreams right now. And that's where you come in, right? That's where my students come in. Um, that's where you come in. We need you, and we need you to be filling the highest echelons of corporate boards, of academic institutions, of scientific journals. We need you, right? Because the world has a lot of complicated problems that we can't keep addressing by putting the same sorts of leaders at the top. So um, I really think that your kind of duality in thought within the sciences is a huge asset, and that you should just keep um, trucking towards that, and kind of having a lot of confidence in your ability to learn these things, but just make sure that you know and are confident in the way that you learn best, and advocate for yourself, because there's room for you to make it so that you're successful in these spaces.
Fantastic. Well, what a really interesting, thought-provoking, and also inspiring conversation, Leah. Thank you for
Oh,
sharing your expertise with us, the great work that you're doing with young people to encourage them and to create inclusive spaces, especially in the hard sciences, to move more towards kind of that STEAM approach, with including the A in the STEM field. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for sharing these resources with us. If you are watching this, we will certainly include those in the description of this video so that you can click on those. You can watch some of the video series that Leah mentioned, but then also think of different ways to identify what type of a learner you are, and the things that we talked about today. So we are so thrilled to have you here. Thank you for spending time with us, and we look forward to having you join us for another series in our Alumni Insights conversation. So Leah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Tom. It was so nice to be here.